Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we have been reporting a lot lately on the fact that China has clearly been trying to get a leg up utilizing this crisis of coronavirus in order to enforce more of its fascio-communist technocratic society worldwide. And we have also been talking about how the U.S. government may be complicit in this going back a long time. And I wanted to first go into this article out of Zero Hedge that says, did Xi Jinping deliberately sicken the world? And as this article says, PRC moral turpitude forces us to consider the unthinkable. And as it continues here, it says, we often ascribe a basic level of humanity to even the cruelest leaders, but People's Republic of China leader Xi Jinping's actions have forced us to rethink this assumption. Although the emergence of the novel coronavirus, now known as SARS-CoV-2, was probably not due to China's actions, the emphasis that its authoritarian system places on hiding bad news likely gave the disease a sizable head start infecting the world. But most ominously, China's obsession with image and mock politic raises serious questions about its lack of moral limits. At some point, the Chinese Communist Party learned of the epidemic and made a decision to hide its existence, hoping it went away. Exposés in Hong Kong's South China Morning Post and the Chinese mainland's Kexin show that the information did flow out of China early in the crisis, did so only because of the courage of individual Chinese people in the face of government repression. People in the Wuhan epicenter, however, began to get wise and scared here and here. By the end of December 2019, forcing their government to say something, the authorities gave the impression of a non-transmissible disease already under containment. We know now this was entirely false, likely designed more to ease civil unrest than protect the people. By the way, all the Hong Kong protests went away, all the global protests went away, and interestingly, much like China, the United Nations also said it was non-transmissible. Same with the World Health Organization, a wing of the UN, and they said not to worry at the time, but we'll go into that more later. As it says here, the mayor of Wuhan even suggested that the central government prevented him from revealing details about the epidemic until January 20th. Considering the first public announcements came out of Wuhan on January 1st, we can assume that she had a sense of danger prior to that. Clearly, downplaying the disease wasn't working, and it was time for the party to get serious. But how serious? Would it provide full cooperation to the international community? Would being seen as a source of this virus hurt its international image? Beyond these, there was a darker dimension. The more Beijing cooperated, the less the disease stood to affect other countries. This includes countries China sees as a threat to its existence, like the United States. Why should China suffer the effects of pandemic while others stayed safe and increased their strength relative to China, based on China's own costly experience? Such a question is, of course, inimical to human decency, and yet we must consider that Xi Jinping has produced the greatest program of ethnic cleansing in the world today. He has curtailed freedoms in China severely and is the father of the panopticon state. His incessant military buildup threatens neighbors while using economic and other subversive means to erode the sovereignty of countries around the world. We should not assume it was beyond his imagining to withhold a degree of support from the international community to ensure that China would not suffer alone. And by the way, as far as hurting other countries and taking over other countries, he does it in the same way with debt as the United Nations, the IMF, does around the world. Again, we'll get further into that later. As it says, strong evidence supports this idea. Hearing the World Health Organization repeat and praise a party line while giving shrift to health advice until quite recently has alarmed many. Seeing Beijing sell defective wares and claim it as humanitarian aid has angered many more. Spreading disinformation during this crisis and hinting at using life-saving goods for leverage, original here, while denying even the faintest hint of wrongdoing, I suspect have ruined China's reputation for some time to come. In short, China's good offices have been reserved almost entirely for burnishing its image at the world's expense, while calling it the greatest kindness and good deeds. None of this can prove whether or when she made a deliberate decision to withhold information in order to imperil others. However, as a longtime student and admirer of China, it is with great sadness I must concede that such a state and its increasingly paranoid leader might very well provide less than full cooperation to stem the pandemic of the century in the crass pursuit of its own interests. This may constitute biological warfare, but even if it does, she should be brought to account for his other crimes against humanity. And we'll get into some more articles right away here, guys. But I mean, look, I think this person is kind of naive when they're talking about this here. Like, I think it's much worse than them seeing it come out, trying to cover it up, and then just not wanting to fight it alone. But I think it was more that it was a carefully plotted out bioengineered weapon, and most virologists and infectious disease experts will say that it looks like a bioweapon and doesn't actually follow the natural path, as Dr. Fauci claims, of a natural evolution of a virus. It simply doesn't. But it's interesting to see how this person kind of lays this out, because they say that they have curtailed freedoms recently, and that we are seeing incessant military build-up, which is interesting because China has been going after African countries for years, much like the United Nations, where the IMF lends more money than these countries can pay back, and then they buy up resources and almost entire countries, which China has been mimicking the UN and doing. By the way, the IMF has also been saying for years that they want to base their headquarters in Beijing, but it's also, responsible for much worse than this in the past. Mao Zedong killed conservatively around 50 million people in his time. So it's not like this is new for China, this country that people for some reason still admire, to do terrible things. They might have the worst record of any country in the world ever. But with that said, I mean, yeah, the U.S. Does a whole lot of terrible things all over the world, and it's not a contest, but I mean, seriously, I don't know why anyone would doubt that China would help geoengineer this, but I don't think it was just like, oh, they found it, they tried to cover it up, okay, let's spread it worldwide so we're not in this alone. The World Health Organization was pushing the Hug a Chinese Person Day. They were encouraging tourism all over the world from Chinese nationals during the outbreak in Wuhan, including in one case that I saw in Las Vegas during Chinese New Year. While Chinese New Year was mostly canceled in much of China, in Las Vegas they have one of the biggest events for Chinese New Year, and I saw more than 10,000 people at the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas early in January for the Chinese New Year event. But as I've been reporting lately, this goes a lot deeper, and I'll pull this article up here. As it says over the Daily Mail, revealed the U.S. government gave $3.7 million grant to Wuhan lab at Center of Coronavirus Leak Scrutiny that was performing experiments on bats from the caves where the disease is believed to have originated. And the reason I bring that up is because, look, if the U.S. wasn't working with China on this, then that is a very strange coincidence, because they were funding literally coronavirus studies in bats that were 96% similar to the novel coronavirus strain from the Yan'an caves, which allegedly the bats that people ate came from. So isn't that interesting? They have the first case of man-made novel coronavirus in a lab in the Netherlands in 2015, and they pass a sample over to a Winnipeg, Canada lab, and then it shows up in Wuhan, China, as they are doing all these studies on coronavirus itself in Wuhan, China, funded by the U.S. government. And we're supposed to believe that that was just a coincidence, but they weren't funding any other studies there. Well, why were they studying the coronavirus so wholeheartedly? What about Event 201, which we see many of the actors that we see on TV right now, the politicians and the scientists, so-called, that have been talking on TV, they were involved in Event 201, an exercise in October 2019 talking about a coronavirus outbreak worldwide, a pandemic that would kill millions of people. It's weird how these so-called coincidences happen. We have to remember, and I've been reporting on it for quite some time now, the U.S. created an alliance with China back in the 1970s when Henry Kissinger met with Mao Zedong against Nixon's wishes, which created a monopoly on trade for China, and that led into the creation of the Trilateral Commission under Jimmy Carter by Zbigniew Brzezinski, who dreamed of a technocratic society, and this allowed China to build up its technocratic society as a fascio-communist, globalist, guinea pig state. And what happened was they created social credit, they created all these things, these tools that allowed the Chinese government to spy on its citizens and put everyone into a grid, not even using chips, but using their faces, facial recognition. There's cops that walk around with goggles on in streets of many Chinese cities, where it shows their social credit above their head, and if they criticize the government online, their social credit goes down, so they can't eat at restaurants, they can't get food for their family, they can't afford rent, they can't travel out of the country, and if their score is just high enough but still low, they go on a plane, they have a high-pitched ringing in their ears so that they feel uncomfortable. I mean, this is totalitarianism. It's horrible. And we see China rise up first with the coronavirus after this obvious bioengineered weapon was leaked out of a Wuhan lab, was what I believe, and it's becoming more and more proven to be true. And I've been saying this since like January. And what we see then is Chinese economy starts collapsing. Well, then China suddenly says that everything's all right, even though 21 million phone numbers mysteriously disappear around that region. They say that they've cured the coronavirus, though there's evidence of a new wave coming. And then the U.S. It gets engulfed by this virus, and they're overcounting numbers. They're calling everything coronavirus, pneumonia, heart problems, all sorts of stuff in the U.S. And while China is undercutting the numbers and not counting all the coronavirus cases, which makes China rise up as a new superpower as the U.S. completely collapses, the stock market collapses, and we enter into the greatest global depression in the history of the world, which is going to impoverish many, and as Bill Gates admits himself, will kill more people than the virus itself, the shutdowns. But then he says that we still need to continue with the shutdowns. It says everything you need to know about this. So I believe this is a global power shift to China. The United Nations has been working with China and has been trying to create themselves in the identity of the Chinese fascio-communist government. It's headed by Tedros, who was one of the heads of the Ethiopian Communist Party, which massacred and murdered countless people. I mean, it says all you need to know. The World Health Organization is a behemoth, a bureaucracy and globalism, and under the guise of science, they are bastardizing the very idea of science, and no one's allowed to question it, which also goes against scientific practice. If you haven't yet, you should really see my interview with Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, 4 degrees from MIT, and was the inventor of email. We interviewed him about a week ago, and I highly recommend you check out our interview. Anyway, we'll continue to go into this issue. I just find some of the initial article that I went into interesting because, you know, we have, well, the mayor of Wuhan suggesting that the central government prevented him from revealing details. Well, I guess so long to him. He's going to be killed now. And then they're saying clearly downplaying the disease wasn't working and it was time for the party to get serious. And then they talk about, you know, the fact that Xi Jinping has created a culture or a society of ethnic cleansing, which is 100% true. You can see that with the Uyghurs. And on top of that, they are placing people in what they're literally calling concentration camps in the thousands, in the millions, from what I've heard. So, I mean, countless people have gone missing. Journalists have gone missing. Whistleblowers have gone missing. There's evidence that they were burning thousands of individuals alive who were sick. They're doing what the World Health Organization said on top of that, interestingly, which was split up families, go into homes, break into homes, and split people up from their families. And obviously, Beijing isn't the only place that is selling defective wares as humanitarian aid. We're seeing, in many cases, a bunch of coronavirus tests, which don't test properly, by the way, sent to the UK, were found to be all contaminated with coronavirus. How does that happen? And then on top of that, I think it was something like 30 million pounds of coronavirus tests that were also bought up by the UK were found to be defective and not work. Only the government can do that. If a business did that, they go out of business fast. But I do find it funny that the person that wrote the original article we went into on Zero Hedge is talking about how China is ruining its reputation. What reputation? They have massacred tens of millions of people at this point. I wouldn't be surprised if the number was actually closer to about 100 million people killed by the Chinese government over the last century. And much of that all in one period of time, by the way, under Mao Zedong. I don't know. We're seeing the Chinese-style government rise up all over the world. It's definitely getting to that place. In Canada, they're talking about restricting medias from talking about coronavirus if it's not towing the government line. And they're talking about punishing them under the law. YouTube channels. People like me. I'm Canadian. In the U.S., they're seizing people's properties by saying they'll end up paying the rent eventually. And that means that they own the property. That means you don't own the property. That means that's communism, guys. And then you have communist central planning, the most amount of money that you could imagine ever being printed, trillions and trillions of dollars being printed, massive bailouts of these corporations and companies and banks that have failed for a long time, and coronavirus acted as just the catalyst to bring down. This is unbelievably bad, and we're looking at the rise of technocracy in the United States now. So again, be vigilant, disobey, and question everything, folks. Question everything, because this is not going to end well for any of us if we continue to bow down and say, oh, it's only a period of time. Let's just expect that they only mean well here. The government will not let a good crisis go to waste and will not pass by the opportunity to control the public more, and that is detrimental to everyone, and that means more poverty, that means more desperation, that means more divide, and seriously, we don't need that right now. We need to recover from this as free individuals. I've been warning people about this issue for as long as I've been doing these videos, about 10 years now, and I wish people listen more. I just really wish people listen more, but nonetheless, we're in the situation now. And I hope that many of you are protected, staying safe, and not allowing the propaganda to get to you, because now more than ever, you need to stand as a free individual, not part of a responsible collective, because that's just communism, guys, and that'll be the road to that communist global order that I'm really concerned is taking over at this moment. If you haven't already, hit that like button on this video. Check the links below. Join our new newsletter at www.iamband.com. I really appreciate everyone tuning in today. Check those links. GoFundMe, Patreon, Subscribestar, and find us on float.app. That's flote.app. Looking forward to seeing you all. Until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon, Subscribestar. We really can't do it without you. We've been so insanely shadow banned, about 90% at this point, and 95% demonetized. As Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, comes in and says that she is shutting down quote-unquote controversial content and cutting out the views on this controversial content by 70%. She's been bragging about it. We need your help more than ever in this battle for truth in information. You guys are what keeps us alive, so we really appreciate just even $1 a month makes a huge difference. If everyone could give just $1 a month, we wouldn't even have to worry about competing against a mainstream propaganda networks. You can also donate to our Bitcoin address on the screen for you to scan if you please, as well as in the comments and description. Liking and sharing makes a big difference as well, and finding us on alternative social media platforms like float.app, that's flote.app, makes a huge difference. We're at Josh Sigurdson as well as at Wham. Float is replacing Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Tumblr, Reddit, and Patreon all in one with encrypted private messaging, and of course monetization on videos for creators, live streams with super chats in crypto, and most of all, no algorithm, because at the end of the day, it's all about reach, guys. This is all about actually reaching people with the message and waking up the public. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, Minds, BitChute, all sorts of different platforms. Try to follow us on as many things as possible, because very soon this channel will very likely just be completely deleted from YouTube, and you'll never see us again, and you'll be stuck with only the mainstream networks. Also, come on out and see us at Anarcho Vegas 2020 in Las Vegas, Nevada in July, where such speakers such as G. Edward Griffin and many others will be speaking. You could use promo code WHAM on your VIP tickets and save 10%, as well as buy extremely cheap tickets for just $20.20. You won't find a cheaper conference than this with such amazing names. Check anarchovegas.com for more information on that. We hope to see you out there. And anyway, I really appreciate all of you guys joining us. You make it possible for us to survive in this volatile, propagandized climate. Until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
Bye.